Hello guys, and we are on the 15th game of Queen's Gambit Decline model games, and now the game once again is played between Botvinnik and Petrosian, and this is relevant to the previous game. In the previous game, Petrosian as black lost, so now he tries another plan. So let's look at it. D4, D5, C4, E6, Knight C3, Bishop E7, CD5, ED5, Bishop F4, C6, E3, Bishop F5, G4, Bishop E6, H3, Knight F6, and Knight F3, Knight BD7, Bishop D3, Knight B6, Queen C2, Knight C4. Compared to the previous game, black has chosen a different plan. However, this move was considered by theoreticians like to be dubious. King F1. Here instead of here, Knight G5, Bishop D7. With the idea of E4 looks good for white. It is useful to provoke H6 move. White will have a target later. So here King F1, Knight D6, Knight D2. White chooses to prepare setting up the usual formation with F3. Uh, Here even Knight G5, Bishop D7 would be an idea now. And also King G2 can be played. Now Queen C8. This was one of the underlying ideas of black's regrouping. By putting pressure on G4, he might be able to do something about the encirclement white intends to carry out. There is an obvious threat of H5, which is taboo due to Bishop takes H3 check. And after King G2, Knight D7. And H5 at this moment wouldn't be a good idea. Because white doesn't fear trade on G4 as he is in a better position to take advantage of the opening H5. F3, G6, Rook AC1. Here E4 would have been much better. Knight B6, B3. Botvinnik plays very prophylactically in this phase of the game. E4 was often possible, but apparently the world champion didn't feel like it. Here if Botvinnik plays E4 and Knight BC4. Oh, I mean E4 can be played, and Knight B3 can be also played with the plan of Knight C5 after Knight BC4 and Queen E2. White can start working on E4 once more here. He plays B3 and Queen D7, Knight E2, Knight DC8, and A4, A5, Bishop G3, and Bishop D6, Knight F4, Knight E7, Knight F1, Since white has refrained from the advance in the center, black considers that he may as well take the initiative himself. This was the last moment at which it could have still have been profitable for white to play certainly e4, h5, bishop e2, h4, bishop h2, g5. Black occupies considerable space on the king side. Knight d3 and queen c7. Uh, this is well played. If instead bishop takes h2 is played, then knight takes h2, queen c7, rook h, f1, and white can try for f4. It is important. Queen g3 check, king. The queen takes h3 doesn't work because of rook g1, and then queen is trapped. Queen d2. In order to prepare bishop takes d6, queen takes d6, rook c5 with an edge. Now knight d7, bishop g1. Botvinnik avoids the trade, but the bishop soon retraces its footsteps. It was again possible to play e4. But after e4, black would play bishop takes h2, and after rook takes h2, f6, black is more comfortable. So the bishop comes to g1 first. After knight g6, bishop h2, knight e7, bishop d1, b6, king g1, f6. And this is the typical Petrosian. He almost never acts rashly. Tal would have played f5. e4, bishop takes h2, queen takes h2, queen takes h2, rook takes h2. Perhaps white should have kept the queens on the board with rook takes h2, rook d8, and king f2. The king aims for e3, but the square has, as it turns out, certain concrete drawbacks. A better continuation was knight d2, knight f8, rook e8, rook e2, king f7, king e3. The king is very vulnerable on e3, rook he8, rook d2, king g7, king f2, d4. F takes e4, knight f8. Not only is d4 under attack, but the knight will soon be able to use the e6 or g6 as jumping off points. And knight e1, knight fg6. Now bishop f7 would have been very strong. The bishop makes room for the knight while improving his own prospectus of attacking the white center with the potential shift to the g6. and knight g2, rook d7, bishop c2, bishop f7, knight f e3 and c5. In this way, black forces the d4 pawn to give way pawn forward so that he can use the e5 square for a knight. More importantly, will now be fixed on the wrong colored squares. White pawns will now be fixed on the wrong colored squares, meaning his bishop will likely never see the light of day again. d5, knight e5, rook f1, bishop g6, king e1, knight c8. Exploiting these kind of advantages is right up Petrosian Street. The knight goes to a new blockade square on d6, rook df2, rook f7, king d2, knight d6. Black is clearly better by now. Knight f5, check, bishop takes f5, e takes f5, c4, rook b1. Black still needs to manage to open a line to win. After rook b1, b5, this is a very well timed move, and after b4, this doesn't help white. The king stands very vulnerably, and black will find an outside passed pawn. c3 check, king takes c3, rook c7 check, king d2, knight e c4 check, and king d1, knight a3, and somewhat simpler was rook e5, rook b2, knight d c4, rook a2, a takes b4, a takes b5, knight takes b5. As we can see, while the two armies may be equal in quantity, quality is another story entirely. Furthermore, we shouldn't forget about black's imposing pawn on b4. It will all soon be too much for white. Rook a6, knight c3, check, and king c1, knight takes d5, bishop a4, rook e c8, knight e1, knight f4, and after rook h2, knight a3 check, king b2, rook c1. What remains is not worth bothering, and black wins. Okay guys, I hope you would have enjoyed the game. I'll meet you in the next game.